So I've been playing Skyrim recently again, and I had this thought. What happens to the Dragonborn when he dies? Uh, Now, I believe it basically does say that at the end he is going to be accepted into Sovngarde and all that crap. But when you think about it, he has basically sold his soul to every Daedric prince out there at this point in the game. If you've played through the entire game and you've played every last thing, this is a character who's literally sold his soul to anyone who's going to offer him power. And that's something that's kind of interesting to me, is just how what's going to happen. As a person, I am constantly in fear of death in my personal life. Not that I'm afraid I'm going to die anytime soon. It's just that when it does happen, I'm kind of concerned about what's going to happen. However, in gaming, it is sort of a necessity. It is something that has to happen at some point. It doesn't have to happen, but someone's going to die eventually. When you're playing D&D, you're going to be killing a lot of people all the time. If you can somehow play a game and not be killing people constantly, good on you. That's impressive. That, one, for the DM to allow it, and two, for you to actually take the things you need to do in order to do that. So what happens when players die, though? That's the thing, and it's really a twofold question. There's what happens in game, and really there's not a lot. In game, they die. Life goes on. But for players, it's kind of difficult sometimes. Now, I haven't actually ever had a character die. I've never killed anyone, technically. Well, that's a lie. I have technically killed 3 of my players, and 2 of them were kind of a bullshit one, and I will blatantly admit that. Because at the end of my current campaign, my current group is more or less on standby right now, and this is because life gets in the way. It happens. But I want to keep going. I want to go back to this campaign. So, and this is sort of jumping way to the end in my stories, but it's something I wanted to talk about. I really wanted to tell the story of the final confrontation between my group and the decision I made to effectively kill them off. Now, as I said, these 2 dying was a complete bullshit situation, and it's for story purposes. And in my mind, the players will decide later on if we ever come back to it. But effectively, what happened, and those who have watched me know the story so far, that my players have been fighting and struggling against a man named Vex. And Vex is leading this cult known as the Cult of Nihilus. Nihilus is the god of balance and death. I don't know if he's actually in any books, but I found him. He just kind of fit the role I wanted. So they finally come down to this big sort of final battle. I've been kind of pushing them and guiding them, and I want them to go here, but I don't want to just say, hey, you're going here now, sort of thing. I don't want to railroad my players. It does kind of make them not want to play. If you try to railroad people, they'll just rebel, so I just gave them free will, so they eventually just said, you know what, let's go kick his ass. Let's get it over with. And the thing that I had them doing was I was having them collect these relics. Kind of super duper cliche, but they had to collect these relics to trigger this super weapon. And I'm not sure if I've talked about this fight yet, the fight about the super weapon, but I'm going to just talk about the final one. So what happens is they've decided that, you know what, it's time. We need to go kick his ass. And they decide to build up this army of rat folk. pretty much is what the plan was. They were going to build this small army to go directly oppose Vex, who has recently taken their country over. They used to be in charge of a nation known as Valcrest, and through plotting, chicanery, and I think I horribly fucked up that word, but basically through conniving and backstabbing, literally, Vex somehow, while they were off doing something else, slaughtered his capital city, burnt it to the ground, and took control that way. So now he had the rest of that country's military at his disposal, and he was using it to basically just harass the surrounding the neighboring nations, and try and slowly work up the death toll. It's sort of one of those pact of blood things. I really feel like I've talked about this already, but if you've seen Full Metal Alchemist, how specifically when they were at the castle in the north, not the castle, the wall in the north, Briggs, I think it was, Briggs Fortress, how what's-his-name was tasked with creating a crest of blood, and the way he did it was by killing off all of the Drachman forces, or throwing the Drachman forces at Briggs Fortress, so there's just people dying. I really feel like I've talked about this before, but so that's effectively what ended up happening. He was trying to just build up the body count, and so that this would be able to awaken the god Nihilus. Now, what the players did is they were going to build up a small army to try and take it back. So they went to this monastery of monks, and this was something for Fuzz because he wanted to go back to where he effectively grew up. So they go to this monastery of monks, and they spend some time there, and they're suddenly attacked by ratmen. And these ratmen are basically just there trying to get food and steal anything they can, kill everyone in the place, take it over for their own. And it's something they say that they're doing. We're trying to take this. This is our new home. So they eventually the party kicks these guys' ass. They're rat folk, which are not really that strong at all, especially for, I believe at the time they were 9th level characters. So I sent a bunch of them at them, but they're still ratmen. They're gonna kick their ass. And what happens from there is they decide to track down the ratmen. As I mentioned in one of my other videos, I threw in this bear character to kind of carry armor to them, and they meet him along this way, and he decides that he's going to help them. So they go to the rat village, or they track the ratmen to the rat village, and instead of just outright killing them, they decide, you know what, we're going to recruit them. We're going to turn them to our cause. And through Fuzz's thinking and Paco's stupidly high diplomacy skill, as a 9th level paladin who is heavily focused in diplomacy, he's pretty damn good at it. So they start recruiting these ratmen, and they go from village to village to village, and they start promising them things. They start promising them, oh, you're going to be the king, you're going to be the general, you're going to be the treasurer. They just keep giving out these titles and these promises effectively for these ratmen. Now, ratmen are all good and well, but they're not going to be a match for a trained military, especially one who is basically going into a total war situation. That's what I had told them, is that the nation of Valcrest has completely gone into total war. Any man, and some women in all honesty, of fighting age are being sent to the front line, are being drafted into the military, trained, sent to the front line. So I'm telling them it's basically this huge situation where they're going to need a massive army, and they've already tried going to other nations, and the other nations were starting to build up an army, which we'll get to. But they gather up this army of Ratmen, and then they go to the local Pelor. Basically, the effective Vatican city of Pelor in my game, just for lack of better explanation, the center of the Pelorian religion. So they go there and they they talk to the equivalent of the Pope, and like, we need men. This guy's gonna try and summon a god to wipe out the world. And no, that's really bad. Yeah, we should probably help you with that. Give us a few weeks and we'll give you 1,000 paladins, which honestly is way more paladins than I should have given, but I kind of had a plan for this. And the plan, unfortunately, was they're not going to win. So they come up with this force. They march them straight up to Valcrest. They come up and they're ready to fight. They're like, okay, we're gonna plan out, and we got this tactics. And they sat down for, I think it was a good half hour, just plotting out the tactics, which was great. It was a decent idea. There was no way in hell they were going to win this. And they realized this. They looked at the group and said, that is a lot of people. We do not have near as many people. Let's go somewhere else. And I can't remember who it was. I don't know if I just kind of had to say, yeah, you guys should probably be going this way, or if one of them finally figured it out. But they eventually went back to the place where this weapon was. They went back to where they were supposed to take all the relics when they found it. And they found this place completely surrounded by Nihilus forces. And instead of communicating with the other forces, communicating with other nations, they decide, you know what, this is the best chance we got. We're going to fight right now. Now, admittedly, I was not going to let them win this fight, which is kind of a dick move for a DM, but sometimes, especially in the situation, basically when this game happened was one of my last chances to play. I was about to start a new job, and personal life just kind of cut into my game. It was going to happen. So I decided, okay, this is going to be our last game, guys. And they fought valiantly. They tried to win, but they quickly realized there was no escape. So they circled up, fought to the last man, and then it was basically down to the group of the three main characters and the bear. And as I stated before, this bear's whole purpose was getting the suit of armor he was carrying into that temple. That was it. One way or another, that suit of armor had to get into that temple. And they just decided, you know what, book it. And they ran. And they realized the forces of Nihilus, let them. They wanted them. And that was the story. They wanted them in there. If they ran in there, they were fine. The moment they stepped out, they picked up their weapons. They were going to force them back in there, or beat them down or knock them out and throw them back in there. That was effectively their plan. So, when they got in there, they realized that the place had been completely demolished. They'd been there before, and it was a very nice dungeon with a very awesome fight. I'm going to look back through my videos because I don't want to tell this fight twice, but I do want to tell this fight. So they get in there and they go into the central room, and I described it. I think I've described it before, but it's kind of like this big circular room with this little path that goes to another room. Honestly, the best way I can explain it is anyone who's played Sonic Adventure 2, the last level, the last boss fight in the game that is inside a building, not the final ultimate weapon where you're Supersonic and Hyper Shadow, not that level, but the level right before that. That is basically the kind of place they were fighting in. And so they go in there, they find a sword that is just stuck in the stone, and it's kind of bound. They see these chains and black lightning and sort of that dark binding sword thing you'll see from time to time, and none of them can touch it. So they see there's obviously something wrong here. And they hear something from out in the other room, and so it's finally time. It's finally that time. They go out. They recognize the voice instantly. They know immediately who it is. And it is Vex. It is their big enemy who they've been fighting and struggling with. And he says, "I've been waiting for this moment. I've been planning. And this is exactly how I wanted it to end. Just you, me, and at the location where the end will begin." The conversation was a lot more back and forth and a lot more jumbled on my part, admittedly. But that's essentially what the message was. He was giving a bit of a monologue, but not too much, and there was banter going back and forth. And then the fight started. Now, the class for Vex was a Biotic Vanguard. I took a class that I had originally used when I first played D&D, put it on him, because that actually was his original class. As I stated before, this is a character from my very first game of D&D. Or this is a bad guy from my very first game of D&D. And effectively the way the class worked is it's on the D&D wiki. But essentially the way it worked is it worked more of, for those who have played Mass Effect, more like an adept, where it's got some mobility tricks, it's got some energy blast, it's got shockwave, those kind of things. And sorry, I lost my train of thought. I'm downloading Mass Effect on Xbox One right now. That's why I'm distracted. But you sorry about this. I'm going to delete. I'm probably going to fix this. But so his style, and I kind of tweaked the class for it to work a little better, where he was much more mobile and able to shoot a lot more. And I think even within the rules the way they were, he could have shot a lot more. But they have this fight, and it's starting to look like it's going to be a tough fight for a short time. Because Paco can't get to him because he's big, heavy, and in armor. Fuzz is getting countercharged, which basically what I was saying is every time Fuzz charges him, he steps into it, concentrates his energy into his fist, and just decks you in the gut really, because Fuzz is an 8-foot tall lion fighting a 5'10" human. But through Fuzz's power and Vea's power, they eventually whittle and wear him down, and I don't even think Paco gets into the fight really. But they're fairly beat up, not gonna die anytime soon, but fairly beat up. Actually, I think Fuzz was 1 or 2 shots away from death. But they finally wear him down, and he collapses to the ground, drops to a knee, and just after breathing a few seconds heavily, they've stopped attacking him. He just punches the ground and sends out this mighty shockwave, blasting everyone back, which really pissed Paco off because because of the shockwave ability. Paco has been thrown back every single time this happens, and because he only has 20 feet movement as a paladin, and Vex was having effectively 60, there was no way Paco was ever going to actually get into the fight. So he was kind of upset when that actually happened. He finally got there, and then he just gets knocked away again. But I set up this scene where he's on one knee, and he's just yelling at himself, or not really yelling, but he's muttering to himself, "I'm not gonna die, this isn't how it ends," blah blah blah, that sort of general thing. And I say he's creating this crystal in his hand. Just energy is flowing off of his arm and forming this crystal into his hand. And as he slowly walks down, he stands up and he slowly starts walking down into the center. And this is where Fuzz starts complaining. Not really complaining, but just like, oh god, it's a 2-stage boss fight. Fuzz doesn't like 2-stage boss fights. And probably for a D&D, it wasn't the best thing, but I didn't want to just stack 300 HP on this guy directly. And I'm also a huge fan of games where there are 2-stage boss fights, which actually does tie into sort of what happened next. Because as he's walking down the stairs, they realize that the sky above is growing cloudier. There was a big hole in the roof that they didn't notice, or I just didn't mention until now. But there was a big hole in the roof of this place, and it's suddenly getting cloudy, and they're storm clouds. They're very obviously storm clouds. And right as a bolt of lightning comes down, he's standing in the middle, and he reaches up and he catches it. And it's supposed to be big and impressive and ripped straight from Dragon Quest. Dragon Quest 8, Giga Gash, and I don't know if Giga Slash does, but Giga Gash, I know you catch lightning and use that as a weapon. That's effectively what I was doing with him. As I've said before, I rip off a lot of things from other games and stuff for my game. So at this point, this energy is swirling around him, and suddenly all of the relics that are in the room, and they are all in the room by hook or by crook, they all just get summoned to him and immediately attached to him. Now, the guys make a joke. The guys laugh about this because how does that work? I basically say that they are ripped off of you and they just form themselves around him, and they're not in their original forms. They're almost demonic at this point. And I gave them this picture of this really badass looking demon thing, or Death Knight, because that's essentially what he had become. Now, there's probably someone who's going to tell me that, oh, becoming a Death Knight isn't that simple. You can't just will it into being, blah, blah, blah. I don't care. It was story. It was just for the story. But he goes into so they start the second round of this fight, and it's not as impressive as the first stage, in all honesty, because now it's just him standing there wailing on them with 2 energy weapons. Effectively, he was wielding a lightning bolt in one hand and his empowered sword in the other. But they eventually get to a point where he's almost dead. at least one of them is 1 or 2 shots away from death. And then hilarity ensues for a short time because he critically failed. On one of his attacks, he critically failed. And we went back to the fumble chart, I believe, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was basically something like he stumbles or he does something that triggers attack of opportunity. Unfortunately for Vex, he was currently surrounded by Vea's Construct, Paco playing Leodin of Hyde, the badass paladin, and motherfucking Arbogast, who is the 8-foot fucking tall lion monk who is the highest level character in the party. So they all get attack of opportunity on him, and it basically just falls into him awkwardly swinging, throwing himself off balance, falling on the ground. And then, I don't know if you guys have seen it, but there's this video of the Green Lantern fighting. It's in some movie, not the Green Lantern movie, but some Justice League movie. And the Green Lantern steps up like he's going to be all badass, and then he gets thrown against the wall, and then these gremlins just hop out and start beating the crap out of him. That's effectively what happened to my big bad evil guy of the game. So it's kind of a horrible way to go out. But all of this leads back to what I was talking about at the beginning. Because even though they killed the big bad guy, they didn't succeed. I had basically been setting them up this whole time to where at the end of the day, Vex was sacrificing himself. Either they were all going to die, or he was going to die. One way or another, that would be enough to summon Nihilus. And Nihilus was summoned. So basically they had failed. They had succeeded, but at the same time they had failed because they fell into the plot. They fell into his evil scheme. So now Nihilus is there. I basically say that Vex's body floats in the air. I think I actually said it was pulsing underneath the armor, and it floated in the air and burst into this big energy swirling, and it turned into a portal and outstepped the god of death. Now, Nihilus is a neutral god, at least the one I have. But I basically did the Ultron thing, which is a lot bigger than Ultron. But I kind of did the scene from Age of Ultron where he talks to them for a moment. He's like, yes, just give me a moment. And he's thinking, he's observing the world. And not through the internet, but through his godly abilities. And he quickly decides that the balance of this world is so far off that it needs to be purged. There needs to be a clean slate. And the party tries to argue with him. They try to say, oh no, there's all these good things, or if you let us take care of it, we'll purge the world, and you just come back 100 years later and we'll be dead by then. That'll work. And he just, no, I'm already up. I'm already here. I'm in a bad mood because I was awoken. And this world needs to be cleaned. But I'll give you a gift. Since you've done so much to try and make this world a better place, and been just as corrupt, you're evil, even though you're trying to do good things, you're still evil because you've killed people to meet your goals, sort of gimmick. He says, you'll be first, and it'll be quick, don't worry. So he opens up this portal, he opens up a portal into the void, and everyone is sucked into it, effectively killing my entire party. But something else happened. Now, I might as well just come out and blatantly say it. I'm not sure if I mentioned it, but Paco has been being hunted. He has been being hunted by a spirit simply known as the Wolf and the Lamb. Others would know this as Kindred, lifted straight from League of Legends. And the ability Kindred has is Lamb's Respite. Basically allows her to prevent anyone from dying for a short period of time in a limited area. That's what I had happen. Paco suddenly realized that after what Paco tried to do is he tried to stab himself so that he would go to Valhalla, even though he's a worshiper of Palor, and I don't think they go to Valhalla. But he tried to kill himself so that he wouldn't be sucked into the void. And it didn't work because he was already sucked into the void. And the Kindred had kept him alive. And it basically proposed another option. Because he was being hunted, and the Kindred doesn't like her prey being stolen, even if it's by the god of death himself. So she presented him another option. You take this sword, and she brought up Silverlight, which is a sword that the group has been carrying forever and not actually using, and you go fight. And he was like, do I have another option? You can stay here in the void. It's your choice. So he basically kind of takes the hint, and he picks up the sword, walks out, and he's back in the arena where they had just fought. And standing there is Nihilus, and they have a little back and forth where he's impressed. He's impressed that you came back, and mildly pissed off that his follower potentially betrayed him. He doesn't know for certain, but it's a possibility. He has it in his mind. So they square off for the final fight, and I make it so that Nihilus has this almost mocking, not really mocking, just you think you can fight me? I'm a god. That sort of thing is just general air of the fight. So I let Paco go first. I just say, yeah, he's letting you attack first. And another situation of, I was not going to let him win. Which is kind of a dick move of me, but Paco is currently at basic training, which was another reason the group was going to be put on hold. So he charges him, and I say that Nihilus had this thing strapped to his back. I didn't really describe it too well, but he pulls it down, and it's a collapsible scythe, and he whips it out, steps behind you, and he slashes out your knees. Not the entire leg, like Paco had thought, but he basically hamstrings Paco, who drops down to his knees. And he puts his scythe, he's standing behind him, and he puts his scythe at his neck, and he asks, was it really worth it? And he doesn't really say anything, but Paco has accepted his character is well and truly dead. There is no turning back. And then he waits. And then he waits. And then he waits some more. And he's like, so what happened? He's like, can I do anything? Can I try and attack him? I'm like, sure, you can turn around. You still have your legs. Paco had thought his legs were completely cut off from the knee down. I'm like, you still have your legs. You can pick up the sword, turn around. You can keep doing whatever you want. And he lunges out, picks up Silverlight, and turns around, and Nihilus is gone. So Paco starts, the armor is sitting in front of him. He doesn't really know what to do, and he starts putting on the legendary armors. Now, one of the armors has an increased healing factor, so his legs heal up. So now he's wearing all of the legendary armor, and the bear, who I took out earlier in the fight, in kind of an impressive fashion. Basically, I tried to just eliminate the bear, so I said he shot his head off, and Fuzz dunked his head back onto his body with a crit success heal roll. I know that's not how it works. I know that should never happen. It was one of those sudden, I rolled a heal, 20. Yeah, sure. You just catch the bear's head in flight and dunk it back onto his body. Why the fuck not? But Paco picks up the bear and he walks out. So, the only person of my group whose character is still alive, in story at least, as far as they know, is the person who is not going to be returning for 2 years. I killed one other person just by a fight, but he was quickly resurrected and then the player left. But now two of my players' characters are sitting in sort of a limbo. And I do have a plan for them. I'm not going to tell my players yet. I'm not going to tell you guys because I know Fuzz is watching. But that's how I've killed off effectively my entire party. Was it kind of a dick move? Yeah, fully admit that's kind of... You shouldn't really have a story excuse to just kill off player characters, but they're going to have a purpose. So where do other characters go, though? Some think they go to Valhalla. Some think they just go serve their god. My Dragonborn is probably being fought over by 5 different Daedra. Who knows what my players are doing. So, until next time, guys. Game on.